You know, it's not polite to stare at strangers. And you really aren't hiding very well behind those bushes. Yes, I can see you. You can come out. I promise I won't bite. I feel like most normal folk would tell you to go away. But honestly, I don't have the energy right now. And it's been a while since I've spoken to anyone. No, you're not disturbing me. I like to come out here sometimes in the morning. I like to watch the mist rise off the lake this time of year, before the rest of the forest wakes up. Before even the trees turn their leaves to the sun. The quiet helps me think. Just people I've known, places I've been, the things I've done. I'm sure it all sounds very dramatic. A lone figure by the waterline, thinking on how to set the world to rights. It's almost like one of those, movies, is it? Look, I know I don't really have any right to ask this of you, but could you stay just a little longer? I know we've literally just met, but you're the first person I've met for a long time, and you seem like you're a good listener. I've a few things on my mind, and for the first time, I know I won't be able to figure them out myself. You don't have to stay if you don't want. Thank you. Rocks, trees, and water don't exactly make for much conversation. When you're alone for long enough, solitude becomes your only companion and you start to forget. Well, so where do I begin? How do you forgive yourself when you only realize so long after the fact that what you've been doing was wrong? When it's too late to apologize or to make things right? No, I've not fallen out with a friend. Alas, it's nothing quite so trivial. That at least implies that I can make it up to them. No, this is something more permanent. For better or for worse. And I fear that I've been living so long with these wrong choices that I'm left marked, broken somehow through decisions entirely of my own juvenile making. I know. One hell of a heavy subject for a morning walk. Look, if you want to go and leave me to my thoughts, it's okay. Still sticking around, then? Thank you. It really means a lot to me. I've only ever had one person that I was close to. Incidentally, they were the one who made me seriously begin to self-reflect. Though it's not because of something they did or said, but rather my own choices inflicted pain onto them. We met, not in a way unlike how you and I are meeting now. I was down by a river a few miles up from here. watching the rapids flowing around and over the rocks. And most, when they see me, they approach and break into my thoughts as though they had a right to my company. But not her. She came down the path and instead just joined me in quiet repose. I was the one who initially began speaking to her. I didn't feel rushed or compelled by any obligation, but rather that we were both simply enjoying the stillness. I learned her name, and that she lived in the nearby village. It had started as a hamlet, but the land was good for farming, and the fish were rich in supply, something I'd helped with, if for a price that none but me knew. Usually, when I extended my hand, those who'd gained my attention would take it, and they would join me in the waters willingly. But she chose not to, and instead placed into it a freshly baked loaf of bread of all things. I realized later that she must have thought me a pauper, or a woman of the wild. It felt so strange to be thought of something other than what I am. But I wasn't against it, so I played along. I have no need for food, but it felt strangely cruel to say as much, so I kept it. Of course, afterwards, when she had gone, I tossed it into the river, watched it bob for a few moments before sinking. I'd never been giving something freely. Always I had taken. So I was left confused by her generosity. Seasons changed, but we always met at the same place, and it became a sort of habit for us. We would talk, she would tell me of her life, and I would simply listen. One evening she came to me with renewed life. I asked her what had changed, and she told me that she had met someone. And I had a genuine sense of pride grow within me when I heard her say that. For as long as I've distantly watched this little town go from a few humble huts to the bustling village it now was, only ever did I speak to them when I was disturbed down by the waters. Now I had someone I could go as far as to call a friend, someone I truly cared for. I no longer offered for her to join me in the deep blue, as she never would accept my hand. But now I discovered to my own surprise that I did not feel as though she were mine to take. They grew closer, she and her partner. He was always buying her trinkets and baubles. But there was one pendant she kept with her every time we met. I felt as though I was a part of her life now, learning about him through her, and I was content for others to pay my price for both her and her village, to keep her happiness going. I, of course, continued to take those who disturbed me, all who accepted my hand. I had gotten comfortable in the rhythm of death and renewal. The village had become almost a pet project to me, and I enjoyed listening to my friend as she told me of the goings-on and the gossip, and of course her husband. when we spoke, I would come away feeling renewed, as though I were doing the right thing for her. There was a time that I saw less of her for a while. I wasn't entirely certain as to why. I figured that she was busy with the goings-on and with the village or home life. I'll admit I was worried, but it wasn't until over half a year later that my friend came to see me in our usual spot. I hadn't stopped going there. I realize now that I hadn't wanted to lose her, and my heart ached in her absence. When she did return, though, she was not her usual self. She was distraught and full of worry, unable to focus. And when I asked her what was wrong, she told me that her husband had been missing for over a week, and she was so scared about what she'd do without him. It dawned on me with horrid realization that he had come to me, and I had taken him to join me in the water. He had been so kind when I met him, but he took my hand as so many had done before, and I didn't even question it. I didn't even think twice. She could tell there was something wrong the moment she mentioned it, and she watched me cautiously, as if she knew. I could see in her eyes the warring sense of hope and dread. As we'd talked over the years, I think some of her humanity had found roots in me, and it must have been my own quiet that told her something terrible had happened. I had hoped the day wouldn't come where I had to correct her vision of me. But in my eagerness to help the village, in my disconnected disregard of my price, I had destroyed the only thing I'd come to cherish. I confessed, and at first she didn't quite understand. She was always of the belief that I was a hermit or hedge witch, but as I told her who, more importantly, what I was, I saw the light go out of her eyes. She had come to find answers in comfort, and I had taken her heart. She went quiet, and silently she started to cry. She stood to leave, and I wanted so desperately to stop her, even going as far as to reach out for her for the first time for something other than my own need. But I was brushed aside without a word, and she walked out of my life. I spent a long time alone after that. Spent a lot of time thinking. I realized that the only reason the village had prospered was, for the most part, because of my own influence over the food and water. But I'd also seen the unintended cruelty of my actions. For all the good I'd done, it was always underlined with grief and loss. I stopped helping almost immediately after that, repulsed by my own actions for the years prior. So I chose to remain in the waters, leaving the bones behind. I traveled upriver in attempts at escaping my own ghosts, but even then I was always haunted by the memories. And as they do, the seasons changed, but the harvests became smaller, the fish harder to find, yet families remained together through the hard times. I, of course, watched distantly in relief at how my influence slowly ebbed away. But only to discover that my absence had left a vacuum that sapped at what little life remained. Despite my resolve at keeping distant, I couldn't allow the place to fall apart so fast. So, I returned. Though only in part. Finding the village was far less than it had been. Closed shops, abandoned homes. The life that had once filled the town had been leached away, drawn from them as the land had become hardened, jealously hoarding what remained. I couldn't allow it to continue, at least not at the rate it had been. So I decided to give parts of myself away, using myself to force a flourishing renewal between sea and land. I would be diminished, but at least I could reduce the suffering as the people migrated. For years I poured myself into the earth, carving away who I had been, diminishing my being until land and people had become sustainable. I took no payment, made no more empty graves, no more broken families. I did find her again, or at least what was left years later. Her life had been etched into the permanence of gravestone, upon which the words, "The water stole from me the one thing my heart could hold." And I think that's what hurts the most. Life would not be the same, not for a long while yet, but I had at least begun to pay my dues. So, here I am, I guess, a shadow of what I was, sat by a lake, thinking about what I've done, who I've hurt. To think all this was because of my own naive ambition to help the town flourish. But at what cost, I wonder? What's this? Where did you get that? This... It's been so long. How? I wouldn't believe it if I weren't holding it in my hands. How could I have been so short-sighted? The reason she was gone. A family. Her family. You. No. I can't possibly keep it. It's not right. I've already taken far too much from you and your family. I think I need some time. Time to process. It's not often that someone from my past, from so long ago, catches me when I'm at my lowest. Thank you. I don't know what else to say, but thank you. I'd like to be alone for a little while, but I'd like to see you again, if I may. I don't think I realized just how much I needed someone, anyone. And I'd love to learn more about you and her family. And maybe somehow I can make up for what I've done to her and to you, if you'll let me. Thank you. Again.